Çöltekin is about understanding and addressing implicit bias. We want to learn more through examining the mechanism of visual illusions in computer graphics. If any questions occur during the session, then please write them into the chat. We will discuss them in the second half of the session. So first of all, I would like to introduce myself very quickly. So I'm co-founder of WeShapeTech, and WeShapeTech was founded in 2016 by Valerie Vieira and Tanja Wüttrich and myself. And apart from that, I'm also co-founder of the graphic design studio Graphic 2, which is specialized in visual communication and brand communication. And obviously, as a designer, I am very interested in any topic evolving around visual perception, and therefore I feel very attracted in the subjects Arzu deals with when she bridges computer science and user experience. This is a little overview of today's session. So after I've introduced WeShapeTech briefly, Arzu will take over and speak about herself, but also about the skill sharing knowledge session that she's prepared for us. And about 1:22, we will start with a Q&A and finalizing the session by a small closing where I will announce our next events. So WeShapeTech is a platform for greater diversity and inclusion and technology innovation. Its mission is to foster a more diverse range of perspectives, personalities, and gender in technical jobs and the top management of companies. Through inspirational activities such as skill sharing, lunch and learn sessions, WeShapeTech wants to inspire and encourage to interact and engage with a wide range of tech-related topics. These are our pillars of action. So with the role models, we shed light on inspirational role models who we can learn from. And with the insights we provide for skill sharing and learning formats, often by somebody in the community, for the community. And as a network at our events, we create an environment of trust and contribute to an open exchange among our members. And if we have job offers, then we like to share them and distribute them in our network. And I'm very excited and happy to introduce Arzu now. So, welcome Arzu. Arzu grew up in Turkey and spent most of her education and studies there. And then she left for her PhD in photogrammetry and geoinformatics and worked as a teacher and researcher in several countries, such as Finland and Switzerland. At the University of Zurich, she lectured and researched in the fields of evolving around geographic information, visualization and analysis, and virtual reality. Currently, she works as a professor of computer science in human-computer interaction and extended reality at the Institute of Interactive Technologies at the University FHNV. And in April this year, she was elected as Institute Director of the IIT. Congratulations, Arzu, on this. And in addition to all of this, Arzu is a very well-known and popular conference speaker. So I'm very proud and happy to have you here and excited to hand over to you, dear Arzu.
Thank you very much, Janine. Hi, everybody. So I'll go ahead and share my screen, and then I'll say a few more words about myself, but then we will jump into the topic that was promised to you, what you signed up for. I'll swap the display so you can actually see you don't need to see the presenter view. And then I think if I should, so you can see my slides, right? And do you also see my mouse? If I need to point at things on the slides, perfect.
Yes.
All right, great. So I think many of you who come to events like this is a little bit of a self-selected bubble. The chances are you have heard about what implicit bias is, but you may not have, potentially many of you have not, may not have made the connection between what is an implicit bias in terms of social behavior and prejudices and whatnot, and the visual illusions. And today I will tell you a revelation I had at some point, and then I realized that actually psychologists knew that all along. And so I was able to support my intuition with also some research. So we'll actually have a look at what really implicit bias is, and therefore, if you understand it, maybe your strategies about overcoming it might be affected by this understanding. You might have seen this, like already in this slide, I'm giving you a little bit of a visual illusion. I imagine this is familiar to you guys. I forgot the name of the illusion now, but it's this little pink square here is actually the same size as this one here, and when it's surrounded by larger bubbles, it looks smaller than if it is surrounded by smaller bubbles. This is already something that your mind does, and then I'll try to get to that at the very last slide again, to see what happens if you remove those things that surround it. And I think we will be probably having a solid example just from this very simple one. So Janine said most of my credentials. Thank you for that generous introduction. Yeah, I'm currently at a computer science department, but my CV is not exactly straight. I actually originally studied geographic information science, and then it's an information science with a lot of focus on geographic stuff. And then I also work a little bit interdisciplinary. Somehow it evolved this way. I also work with some astronomers, and I also work with health-related research. And most of the time, I feel like my hammer is the data science and the visualization and understanding of interaction and cognitive processing, and it applies to these different domains in some sense similarly, even though the scale and the focus is changing. So I'm more of a methods person. And I have kind of some weird credentials from this gender perspective of being a woman in technology. I'm a first woman to earn a PhD in photogrammetry in Finland. This is very strange in some sense, a Turkish woman going there and earning a PhD in photogrammetry. Strangely, also, I'm not the first one in Turkey at all. I had actually a female photogrammetry professor when I was studying, and I'm the only woman as the institute director in my current school of engineering. All the others aren't. I'm kind of a unicorn in many ways. I check a lot of boxes, and this makes me think. I mean, the reason that I'm giving this type of talks is also because people ask me about it, and it's like and then I call my parents, and what did you do wrong? Why am I the only one in this crowd? So this is the kind of things that makes me reflect on why is it like that, and can I come up with some explanation. As a sidetrack, talking about Finland, Switzerland, and Turkey, there was an Economist piece a couple of years ago, and they were looking at where is the best place for women, a working woman, and Finland kind of scores on the top, just next to Norway and Sweden, which I guess not a surprise, but I think a little bit of a surprise is how Switzerland and Turkey cluster down here. So you get a lot of other countries, and this is the OECD average, and perhaps from the images or biases we have about Switzerland and Turkey, one would not necessarily think that, but we have some issues, let's say, about work and women in both countries. And I have experiences in these three spaces, quite longer stretches of time. As a criteria, of course, it's all, I mean, as researchers, some of you are, and as also I am, one can also say, well, you know, is this the right criteria to think about what is right or what is good? But that was one study like that. Now, talking about biases, even in countries where things look better for women, there are still very strong biases, and this is an interesting topic from like what is conscious and what is unconscious. I see something on the chat. I'll just take a quick look if it's a question. Well, yes, there is this. I think we can handle it after. I was just wondering if somebody is reporting a problem or something like that. Okay, sorry. I'll remove the chat again. All right, so I mean, many of you again are, I'm sure, pretty familiar what it is. What is important is that it's a belief about a group of people. So first of all, it's not necessarily at the personal level, but it's at the group identities. You look at somebody and you say, okay, this is a Turkish woman. Now that's the Turkish and the woman. They are not, you know, who I am, but it's an external identity that you can quickly pick up on that. And you may have already some categories in your mind where I'm like, you're putting me in some box, or we are doing that. It's not just you are doing it to me, but I'm doing it to you. And this is the thing, is that the key thing is that you're not aware. It's not consciously held. This is happening because our minds work like statistical machines. Let's have a look at what happens about aware, like how it is affected in other domains, such as a visual illusion. This is called a hollow mask illusion. So this is a mask, and as it rotates, now you are looking at the mask from behind. And again, you are looking at the mask from front. I'll play it once again. So this is the front of the mask, and then it rotates and it rotates. And now we are looking at it from the front. Again, I will put it here. So this is the back of the mask. So when you are looking from the back of the mask, you know from your everyday experience that it should be hollow, and the nose should be, in fact, concave, not convex. It should not come out. But why I said the mind is a statistical machine is that this is a cognitive bias, in the sense that your brain says you've seen millions of faces to this day. They never actually go inverted. They always pop up. The features are convex. And that actually corrects your perception, so to speak, based on a cognitive processing that was held based on previous knowledge, prior knowledge. And this occurs in certain conditions. Here, the shadows or the light is also important. So it's not like every time you look at a mask, it will pop this way. But under certain conditions, combined with the light direction and the shadow and the familiarity with faces, that's what you would get. And this is extremely common, where very, very few people can bypass this illusion. It's a very strong one. This also occurs on terrains, as Janine mentioned, I mentioned as well that I did geographic information science. I did a lot of maps and satellite images and that kind of thing. This is a satellite image served by Google, and it is in every satellite image service that you will find. A number of them have this visual illusion. If you look at this area where I marked with yellow dots, this is actually a valley where there's a river that flows through this valley. For majority of people, however, this does appear as a ridge. So the 3D perception is inverted. And you know that this is inverted, this is wrong, because there's snow on the valley floors and the river is on the ridge. And you know that from previous knowledge that this is not right. I mean, this lake is literally standing on top of something the way that I see it. More people can bypass this illusion. Now, I don't, in a class, I usually ask people to raise their hands to see how many people see this as a valley and how many people see this as a ridge. We did a lot of online experiments and offline laboratory experiments to see how common this illusion is. And it is extremely common. It's there's some 20 to 40% of the people who can bypass it, but otherwise, and they often bypass it because they interpret the scene. If you, another kind of a little nice effect of it is that if you sort of rotate the image by 180 degrees, which you can see from the labels, that this is what I've just done from this image to this image. The only thing I've done, nothing else, but that 180-degree rotation. Now the spatial relations are a little bit restored. Now the valley looks more like a valley and the hills look more like hills. That is, again, for the majority of people. Some of you in the audience may not have experienced it exactly like that. And there, I would like to study you. I want to know exactly why those who can bypass this illusion. It's a question of vision and cognition. But what's interesting is this 180-degree rotation thing, right? So if you do that, why do we have the actual spatial perception restored? This happens because something called light from above prior. It's also sometimes mentioned as light from above assumption. It's also known as overhead illumination bias. I highlighted the word bias because we are talking about cognitive biases, and this is exactly what it is in the visual illusion community. Visual illusions are often cognitive biases. And you can control the light direction. Now, the explanation of this light from above prior is that, you know, you're born, the sun is up there, and then the moon is up there, and the ceiling light is up there, and the street light is up there. You are not living in a world where the light comes from below. So what does that also mean is that when the light is above, shadows are always below. And your mind implicitly learns that the shadows are always below. And now when you make a satellite picture like this, the satellite flies sun synchronous, and then it takes the picture around 10 a.m. And on the northern hemisphere, the northern slopes are in shade. And we put the map north up, and then the shadows are not below. They are, in fact, above. And that is where your mind interferes and says, yeah, perceptual signals tells me something, but I know better. So I'm going to correct it for you. Now, this we have a very strong evidence because in computer graphics, we can render terrains. These are called shaded relief maps. So cartographers use this. They used to be a form of art. People did it by hand in the past. And now we can do it in the computer rendering software. So we can play with the source of light. What I did with the satellite image by rotating in a software environment, we can say, okay, illuminate the scene from the top and illuminate it from the side and so on and so forth. And that's what we did. And we have shown people this and asked, is the ABC a pair, clearly a valley, or clearly a ridge? What do you think? And this is the northwest lightning. So it's from the top left, and this is the southeast. This is the opposite lightning. It's exactly the same terrain. And of course, the majority of people pick that as valley, and majority of people take this as a ridge. And then there's something called bistable perception. It can happen that it actually swings between the two types of perceptions, but I'm not going to go into the whole vision science of it. I'm going to share with you the findings from this particular study. We have done this as a controlled experiment in a lab. We also have eye movements of people, and we did this with shaded relief maps, with satellite images, and so on and so forth. So what comes very clear is here, it's a complex graphic, but you'll quickly understand. We manipulated the light direction. So we have illuminated the scene from the north, and then stepwise, we changed the light direction. 22 degrees, 45 degrees, 60, 90 degrees, and so on and so forth. So we came the full circle. We gave people a lot of different terrains. They kept marking clearly a valley, clearly a ridge, maybe not so clearly, just valley, I'm unsure. And the blue bars show us the good match between clearly, like if the future was a valley, and if this was a valley, and people said valley, you would get a blue. And we have this Likert scale, you see 1 to 5, which was here, clearly a valley, unsure, a ridge, clearly a ridge, right? So if you see this blue bars, this is also marked with 5 scales. And the blue here means that it was valley, people said valley. It was ridge, people said ridge. So there's a match. And you can see very clearly that in the northern angles, so from here, the blue bars are dominant. So people are doing well when the illumination is from the north. And some people make mistakes, and some people, here you already have some ambiguity, but majority northern angles are clearly better than the southern illumination angles. When you put the southern illumination, everybody gets the terrain form wrong. When it's valley, they think that it's a ridge, and there's a huge agreement between them. So here, everybody thinks that it's a ridge, but it's actually not a ridge, right? So this is what you get from controlling the illumination angle. And the cartographic convention is to put the illumination angle here on the northwest. In our study, we found that it's a little bit better in the northwest. Here, you see that 0% is getting it wrong, and here it's also a little bit better than this one, and these are statistically significant. I also marked this belt because it's a little bit interesting when it's ambiguous. So here, half of the people say it's a valley, the other half says it's a ridge, but then here it becomes a bit like more the majority. And there's this, you see these lines are not straight, which is also interesting. There's not only that the light is from above, but it is from above left. there's a preference to left. This is also intriguing because the explanation on that is that artificial light, we usually put it on the left because majority are right-handed. Or if you're doing anything with your hands, whether you're writing, whether you're doing craft, you position yourself against the light that it comes from the left so that you don't have the shadows of your own fingers on whatever you are doing. So this is the left bias. So what happens here is basically your mind is learning not only that the light is from above, but majority of the time you experience the light above left. It's a very strong case. It makes a case of what it is. Now, one question is, how much are we aware of this? We talked about implicitness of these biases, right? So if we ask people, is this a valley or a ridge? About 2% were able to bypass the illusion when they were shown a shaded relief map. So there's no texture, tells you what is, a snow or vegetation or river. And then we have shown them satellite images in black and white, just to understand also a little bit the effect of the color, and the exact same region with the satellite images in color as well, black and white and color. So here you can see that more people can bypass the illusion because there's something that tips them off. And here very few people can. Now we ask them, how confident are you about your answer? And what you see is a complete opposite. So the stronger the illusion, the more certain people are about their answers. And that makes sense. It's like, yes, that does indeed look like a valley. I'm very sure. When the illusion is strong, that's how it goes. When the illusion is a little less strong, people are a little less confident. And it's like it directly maps in the opposite way, which suggests that we are mostly unaware that we are experiencing an illusion. And I think this is very important to transfer to the social domains. And it is important because many people who explicitly identify progressive and egalitarian also make these implicit, they are also prone to implicit biases, which they may not know or be aware of it, right? What's also interesting as a metacognition topic, which is a sort of a gendered finding, I need to replicate this with a larger population, but we had also looked at how does our male and female participants differ. And in this case, the accuracy wise, it's quite similar. We also had a little bit like people with more experience with maps and less experience with maps. So we split it, and whether they are men or women, they get similar amount of answers right and wrong. Here you see 40%, mainly because we also have the correct answers. So the terrains that are actually correctly showing the valley or ridge configuration. So if you look at the confidence, however, it looked first, men were more confident than women about their answers. And when we split it by experience, something very interesting pops up. And that that you have, for example, for women, the level of experience doesn't really matter. So people with a little bit more experience are expressing a little less confidence, but it's not statistically significant. It could be completely coincidence. And here, what you see is that inexperienced men are most confident. And this is very interesting, both in terms of how we socialize men and women, and in terms of how education or experience does something. And I think for me, this is also important, because if you have way of trying to deal with implicit biases, or if you have some behavioral problems that you see or you want to correct, experience actually can, this is in your lifetime, it's not ingrained in your chromosomes, it's obviously does something, right? So like the more experienced the male participants were, the closer their confidence was to our female participants. And this is for me quite also an interesting thing to reflect on. For me, it probably, I'm not a social scientist, but it probably goes back to how we socialize children from early on, and how the men are not supposed to lose face, or I don't know, and women are fine with that or something. I don't know what it is. Maybe you can tell me. I imagine there's somebody in the audience who knows better. So in essence, what is the message is that our minds automatically categorize stuff at sort of an operating system level, if you like. If you're a technical audience, that might resonate. It's not like even something that you control, it just happens in the back end. And then like shadows, or where they belong, where should the shadow be? Is it north, south, up, north? Or we do that exactly to people as well. And this is where implicit bias for social context come in. And this was something that that was a Nobel Prize winning group, Kahneman and his colleagues. They talk about system 1 and system 2 in cognitive systems. And system 1 is where you make quick judgments. You look at someone and you say, okay, this person must be someone powerful. This person should be an honest one. So you don't even realize you're doing it, but you're putting people quickly in the blink. This is also a name of a book. You might be familiar with it as well. Maybe some in the audience. In the blink of an eye, you actually have a sort of a prejudgment of the person. And that is what system 1 does. This is a useful cognitive mechanism. It helps you very quickly to avoid risks, or maybe know when to relax or something like this. It has an evolutionary function. It's not completely useless, but it sometimes goes wrong. And system 2 is when you need to deliberate and put the pros and cons and check your system 1 judgment and say, am I being fair? Do I interpret the situation correctly? And get yourself in check. That's called system 2. They talk about halo effect in this book. If you haven't read it, you might enjoy it. Actually, it has got a lot of interesting examples. And in this halo effect is when you have sort of a person who walks into the stage and they are celebrated, and then at some point you have so many of these types. Then you see the same type, you are impressed by them, and it's an automatic assumption of their abilities and what they can do, and they call it halo effect. Of course, this completely this serves a lot of people. So if you start saying that, yes, okay, and this is also, there's a lot of evidence on that like tall men are in the position of power. Perhaps when we lived in caves, tall muscular men mattered. When the tigers attacked us, we needed people who could push them back. Perhaps this is where it comes from evolutionarily. I don't know, but this serves a lot of people, because then you associate power positions today in our urban societies, where it's always to do with intellectual power and very little to do with muscle power. You still associate that with certain, height and apparently symmetry and so on and so forth. But we do this with a lot of things. We do for gender. This is a little bit on the focus today, but not everything about gender. We do it with race. We do it with age. We do it with ethnicity, name, and class. How you signal about your economic status. Apparently, your height, your weight. I mean, height is very interesting. There's like an income difference. The taller people earn more, and weight. Apparently, overweight people get bad service at the hospitals because doctors are prejudiced about them, and so on and so forth. This goes on, and there's like a lot of studies about this. If you have not heard about it, it's called intersectionality. So if you think that, for example, as a woman, you might be disadvantaged, if you are maybe a woman with the right attributes, otherwise you might be actually advantaged against a man who do not have or does not have these attributes. So it's not like a binary thing that, the world is always hard for women and hard for men. It's not like that. So it depends. And there's a combination of things. But yeah, we will see. Also that, it's not exactly a pinky rose for women either, even though things got much, much, much better in the last 100 years. So this was an example from the book called Blink. I referred to it in a few minutes ago. Malcolm Gladwell is a Jamaican man, and he took a test from Harvard called Implicit. You might try it as well. And he found that he's prejudiced against Black men. He himself is a Black man. And that was interesting for me because it is very common that we also internalize this. There's this, like, you pick up on the social cues about who gets the priority, who is entitled to things, and you yourself don't think you are entitled to things because you don't have this, like, you don't have the right appearance, you don't have the right, I don't know, this or that dimension that we mentioned in the previous slide. And he discovered that. The book starts with that, and then it's also filled with a lot of interesting examples of the system 1, like the quick judgment of, like, based on external identities of a person and not actual qualities of the person. Now I'm going to go through a number of examples from different fields. I'll go through them a little bit quickly in the interest of time, so that we can actually have some time to discuss. But I wanted to say that, I mean, this, the reason I'm going through a number of them is that like, if there's like one study that says, yeah, this is happening, then you might say, yeah, but you know, this variable or that variable, did they correct for it? Is that like, it's just overwhelming how much and how many different domains are showing some sort of bias. This is a science thing that was in early 1980s. They sent sort of a task to schools or something, and they asked children to draw a scientist. And that was very interesting. Out of 5,000 students, only 28 girls and none of the boys have drawn female science. I mean, 28 out of 5,000, that those girls need a medal because they are somehow different. And this, there was a more recent study about this. Apparently it's more like 10-13% today. And strangely enough, that kind of reflects the academic distribution of number of professors. For example, at the University of Zurich is about 13%. In my school, we are 4%, but I'm in a school of engineering. So this probably, I mean, this, for me, I will make a point at the very end about role models, that I think that is what it is. Like you see, you know, you are born in a world, you see people in these roles, and then you say, okay, that's like, this is the kind of profession a man does, and this is the kind of profession perhaps a woman. And we also have that, like with the nurses or kindergarten teachers, you would probably draw a woman, and hardly anyone would come out with men. You can also see that in names. So this is like a profession bias, and you also see it in names. And there's, I mean, this was also a debated study. It's in Germany. Somebody took a number of essays that were written by the school kids, and they sent it to anonymize it, or they didn't anonymize it. They switched the names. They sent it around in different teachers and asked them to grade this essay. And then it looked like, you know, if you had a Turkish name instead of a German name, you basically start life a few points behind. There was I don't remember now the exact difference. I remember I've read it, but I don't remember it. But it was, and then this comes also in the, you know, people do it with the CVs. You can put a picture with a different name or exact same CV and see how many interviews they get. And that also happened. That there was a study in France and study in Germany. So here it's the name and not the gender and not the not any other factor. It's exactly the same essay, but if you have the wrong name, the person who's grading you probably thinks you should be somehow intellectually weaker. So this is really, really unfair for children who might not have, you know, not even embraced anything about that culture yet. Not exactly. Even if it is, you know, it's a whole discussion whether we should even consider the culture. But the name thing also appeared in the, as I mentioned, in CVs. I have many more examples. These are selected ones. This is a very famous study, and some of you, again, might have heard it. They took Heidi Roizen is a real person. They took Heidi's CV and they made it Howard Roizen, and they gave half the people Heidi's CV and half the people Howard's CV. It's exactly the same CV. And they asked whether you would work for this person or what do you think? And they seem to like Howard better. They would work for Howard. They think Howard is a leader, and they think Heidi is unlikable because she moved the family from one city to other, and so on and so forth. And this happens, I think it's in, it's a Yale or Harvard study. So this happens in a progressive, well-educated cohort. It's not, you know, really like, you know, a conventional place where you might say people don't know better. And then we see this discrimination, John versus Jennifer. There was a news a couple of years ago that fewer women run big companies than men named John. So there are more Johns than there's women at all. And then what is also interesting is that I think was Yale. They took the CVs again, identical CVs, and then the faculty members, and that was a mixed cohort, you know, both men and women, they would actually hire John, and they would pay who were willing to hire her would pay her, even if they would hire Jennifer, and they would pay her 4,000 less a year. And just by the name, you lose tangibly, you might lose money. And this is very strange. This is, I mean, again, it is not the kind of people who probably think that they are discriminating. It's probably kind of people like you and I, and we think that we are fair and we are enlightened. And this is exactly the outcome. So it comes out in professor evaluations. People do sometimes blind evaluations. If it's online teaching, you put maybe a picture and the name, but people, like, you never have video interactions. And then you see that men are evaluated better for exactly the same sort of, interactions. And that came like in multiple different studies. It came also just recently for teaching assistants, again and again, I mean, different places, different schools, and so on and so forth. And then it comes out in winning academic grants. For SNF also published this recently, and there was a Swedish study as well. So for a woman to win, I'm a professor, right? So I mean, for me to win a grant, I need to have twice as productive as CV as a male counterpart. This is something, if this happens in Sweden, imagine the rest of the world, kind of like you have seen the graph from the beginning, Finland, Norway, Sweden, that's where you have a lot of measures in place as well. So it doesn't help, unfortunately, even today. I mean, these are not historical examples. And we have also this example from invited talks, apparently a lot of panels and professional talks. This is a bit of, now that I see some awareness on this now, people get less invited, and they try to correct if it is women's interest in given talks or not. It's not really so, and if it is really speaker pool composition or not. So they try to correct for it, and there's again a sort of a bias on that one. This was very striking for me as well as a person who writes recommendation letters. So when a postdoc or a PhD student or a researcher completes the work and they are going, and we write letters for them, and apparently we write shorter letters for women and we use different words again, things like hardworking and diligent, and we don't use the superlatives as much for women as we do for men, and this is a problem. The shorter letters thing was very hard for me. And yeah, this is also kind of almost funny. That is MIT, the very famous American university. And apparently a senior faculty member, a professor with many years of experience, has less space if they are women than their peers. It was comparable to a junior faculty member. And I thought that was laughable in some funny way, because I'm pretty sure there isn't a boardroom that actually makes this decision consciously. I'm sure it's not like, you sit together and you say, men need a bit more room, so we should give them a bigger room. I'm pretty sure this is not a conversation. This is implicit, but it does somehow like what people deserve, how they should be celebrated somehow. And it is, I find it both laughable and in a way surprising that this even happens in space. And here is the most shocking one of it all. This is a 2022 study in the UK, and we should look that up in different nations, I think. And they looked at 1.3 million patients, and they looked at surgeries. And it turns out if the surgeon is a guy and the patient is a woman, there is a lot of problems, like serious problems. People are more likely to die, and there was like the 16% greater risk of complications, 11% greater risk of readmission, 20% more likely to have a longer hospital stay. That's very strange. They also contrasted this if the surgeon was female and the patient was male. And there, in fact, the survival rates were also higher for men if the surgeon was female. But the outcomes, this kind of outcomes were comparable. It was similar. And if they also looked at if, women operate on men or women, or men operate on men or women, or so they try to do this contrast or cross-tabular analysis. And it is pretty shocking. And this is, again, a group of people, if you ask them explicitly how they see themselves, I'm pretty sure they don't realize that they treat women and men differently, or they take the problems of women or men or their patients actually maybe more seriously or less seriously. I have some friends who are in this profession. I don't know anyone who would say, yes, of course, we have to pay attention more to men, but it is very strange. And that was a sort of a depressing study from 2022 that actually asked sort of 75 countries, a largish survey, and 9 out of 10 people said, women should not do this profession or that profession, or they should do more of this or less of that. So there was a lot of, for me, this was very sort of a strange finding, because also if you go to the surgery, I don't know if there are surgeons in the room, but it's considered a predominantly male thing to do. I don't know what the historical reasons are for it, but men are supposed to be better at it somehow, perceptually speaking, which, you know, this shows the other way around. It is also possible that for women to make it to this sort of prohibitive group, maybe they have to be really better than average. I don't know. So there's a lot of things to discuss and understand. But if you ask this, 9 out of 10 people might say, yeah, I mean, surgery is more likely a men's profession and women should probably not do it or something. And then it's like, no, we have a problem there and we need to really, really address it. I'm not going to go into the more details now. I will use another 5 minutes maybe or less to see if this is at all justified. I already hinted a little bit that, like, you know, the one documented difference between men and women is the muscular differences. So in athletics, if you look at the Olympic performances, men are better, and this gap is clear. Intellectual differences, there is no evidence whatsoever that men are superior to women. In fact, in academic areas, there is a turn kind of the other way around. More women are entering in the universities everywhere in the world, even in countries where there's systematic and explicit laws that favor men. And in school subjects, but also what is considered hard subjects, kids can do it, so it's not an intellectual ability thing. Like women, the girls can do math. So there's absolutely no evidence that they can't. There's there's so many studies, and they are actually even a little bit surpassing men. In some of my earlier talks, I said maybe in coming decades, there may be even a risk the other way around, that the white collar jobs may be more women than men eventually. There's if this is so, this is 56% in 2015. And if it continues this way, if this trend continues, it is possible that the white collar jobs are going to be more women and blue collar jobs are going to be more men. And then you have another social problem. But for now, we are rather trying to say, okay, women can do this, obviously, let women do it. And, you know, this should not be really a conversation. It is, for me, the evidence is overwhelming and clear, even though the bias is the other way around. And yeah, what can we do? Obviously, we can reflect, introspect, educate ourselves, educate others. And if you have obviously a job, if you're sitting in a hiring committee, if you are in a panel, you can try to intervene. Whether you are fair, whether you are using your system one, and if you are maybe using a prejudice and not really individual merit, and depriving yourself and the society from a competent person because we have a mind that plays tricks on us is obviously not desirable. And if you are on the job market, I joke about it, that maybe change your name to John, but I think that's obviously not a viable option for everyone. So I think the one thing that I can say is that don't give up so easily. So you might experience more rejections, you might not get as many interviews, and that means, you know, don't take it too hard very quickly. Of course, reflect yourself and see how, you know, develop yourself professionally, not that you shouldn't, but you should also not say after 3 or 4 or 5 rejections or something, you shouldn't think that maybe I'm not good enough. You may be rejected for the wrong reasons, so you must keep going. You might have to try harder. That's the only thing I can say at the moment, because at the job market, I don't think you can affect I don't think there's much strategies that you can affect other people's prejudices, but I mean, there's not much we can do. At least I cannot think of any. You can tell me if you can think of more. Blind review is interesting in some professions that might have relevance. In academia, basically not, because CVs are it's transparent. You quickly see who did what, when, where. But in musical, in orchestras from this Blink book, that was very interesting and quite striking difference. They started putting a curtain, if you like, or a panel between the performer and the jury, and the number of women that got hired for positions that weren't traditionally women's instruments, that really grew, which is very telling. And then quotas, I find it also hard, but it is probably necessary if you think that the role models work. I think the key idea should not be hiring women just because they are women, but the key idea should be to remove not hiring women because they are women, or other ethnicities, etc., etc. This should be the goal, and the quotas might contribute to that. So maybe you are overlooking someone for the wrong reasons, and then quotas forces you to think. They force you to think, but quotas also leave a bad taste. It's a bit complicated. You get women hired in a position. Some colleagues are like, you are hired because of the wrong reasons, or are you hired despite this? I hope that for the next generation, this is not a conversation topic. It should not be because, and it should not be despite. It should be based on merit, and that's what we are striving for. But as long as the role models are affecting people's psychology, I think we need to continue this. I don't know if there's a better way out. All right, so implicit bias, this is my last slide, is a well-documented phenomenon. It is like optical illusions. It's not your fault if you have that. But if you catch it, and if you are able to catch it, it is your responsibility. It is our responsibility to identify and counter and do something about it. So if I know that my illusion tells me that it's a hill, but it's actually a valley, I should do something and not send my troops thinking that they are going to climb when they are actually descending, or I should correct my planning, right? And if I'm aware of the illusion, I might do something about it. And it's exactly the same in social situations. And we should take personal action towards that. And of course, also, I mean, this was a bit kind of on the gender heavy, but it's not only gender. It's also important to remember that privilege and discrimination can be in many forms, and it's important to remember that they intersect, and the role models seem to work. Looking at this draw a scientist example, for instance, it changes the way that we see that somebody belongs to a particular place. So probably we need to continue this path. And then I think one last thing is the psychological one. This is very hard. I had a student who felt like they were losing their privilege in a place where there was a sort of a conversation of Black and white people, and the Black people had some quotas, and the white student felt disadvantaged from that. And this I can understand. I can understand the feeling. But I also understand that you had something for all your life, and all of a sudden someone is kind of taking it away or something. So we have another thing to process here. It might feel that way, but I think sometimes it is important to see whether some of our privileges are earned or if we took them for granted, and other people maybe have to work really hard for it. So these are my last notes. Thank you very much for your attention. And now I will do what I promised earlier and remove the additional like circles, and we can see that these two things are indeed the same. So I'm going to leave it here. If you have any questions or comments, I'm happy to engage into a conversation.
Wow, thank you very much, Arzu. That was amazing, and I love the takeaways at the end. Really,
thank you,
astonishing. Wow. We have a couple of questions in the chat. I would like to refer to them now. Let's see, I'm quickly buzzing through them. Christina said, this is fascinating. What an interesting way to approach this topic. I agree. Is it normalized against culture or geography? Would you like to refer to this, Arzu? Is it normalized against culture or geography? I mean, that was in one certain stage of the presentation. Maybe Eve would like to, Eve, would you like to join the discussion and explain how you meant your question? You there? Okay, not quite now. I will jump to the next question. When you are inexperienced, best way to get experience is by doing. So you fake it to get a shot. That's a comment of Ivor. Do you agree on that?
Yeah, to some degree, there's some psychological evidence that I think like if you it can change your mood or level of confidence. Like if you smile, there's a sort of interaction between mind and body, right? Like sometimes you smile because your mind tells you to smile, and sometimes you smile and your smile tells your mind that things are okay. So there's some psychological evidence that pretending can help eventually to actually feel into that role or getting some more confidence or something like that. There's some reason to do it, but of course it's a slippery path in the sense that, you know, it can also lead to some sort of imposter syndrome if you're overdoing it, and if you are claiming to know things that you don't actually know, that people who know will see through. So you have to be a little bit selective about what you are faking until you make it. I think the emotional things and the mood and etc., that's perfectly fine. But an actual knowledge, I wouldn't recommend it. I think that it's better to be transparent and say that I don't understand this or I don't know this, but I'm willing to learn. I wouldn't. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Yeah.
Well, hi, Arzu.
Hi, Ivor.
Very interesting as always. So I wrote this comment. It was a slide of your research in 2016, and the people with less experience were more confident.
Oh yeah.
But one of the reasons for this.
I see. So you think that might explain that, you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then the question will be why do men do it more than women?
Maybe. No, that's interesting. Thanks, Ivor.
Mm-hmm. And there's a question from Isabella. She says, I wonder how about left-handed people? How does it work for them? Is there a difference in?
Yeah, for the left bias, there is a difference. We have early evidence that for the left-handed people, we are talking about this overhead illumination bias. For right-handed people, it's clearly on the left, and for the left-handed people, it is still on the left, but it is closer to north. And that's also a fascinating subject. And this is, I think the reason is that they should have a right bias. But the reason that they have it still on the left, but closer to the top, is probably because they live in a right-handed world. So if you go to a classroom, the architects often design it so that the windows are on the left. So even if you are left-handed, you experience the light from the left more. And maybe in an individual situation, you would position your light on the right, but so that they experience the world a little differently, and you can see it in the signal. We are collecting more data globally.
Thank you. Thanks.
Sure.
Wonderful. So Eve says, do women have the same biases on women?
Yes, they do. So we have also some studies where you have a board made up entirely of women, and they still pay Jennifer less money, and they still hire John for more technical work because they think that technical work more somehow implicitly we think that technical work is more what men do somehow traditionally, or I don't know what it is. I actually should really interact more with the gender and social science studies people to have formal explanations. But I'm aware of the studies that indeed women also discriminate against women. Black people discriminate against Black people. Turks discriminate against Turks. We have a sort of a perception of hierarchy in our minds, and we see our own place also, like our own tribe's place also in this, and it's not fair, but it is shown.
Mm-hmm. It's important to know that we will have it, right? So
exactly.
Mm-hmm. There's a follow-up question from Eve. There are more male surgeons? ? I guess you evaluated them.
Yes, there are more male surgeons. It's almost more or less globally so. So medical students are about the same numbers, men and women. So in some cases, actually more women enter medicine. But in surgery, it's a predominantly male profession. It's one of the sub-specializations of medicine. For whatever reason, men go more. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. And a question from Miriam. What are your personal experiences so far regarding the mentioned biases, in brackets, as an actor or receptor, and how can you train your own awareness?
Yeah, it's a very hard question. So I've been in both situations, right? So I'm currently in a position where I sit in committees and make all kinds of decisions about exactly the stuff that I said. I write recommendation letters and so on and so forth. And I've been also on the receiving end of these. What is hard about it is that it is hard to pinpoint what is based on your external identities and what is based on your qualities. It is a little bit risky to quickly attribute the way that you've been treated to these things. Because there may be some truth about it, that maybe you are not ready for something. Maybe your training is still in the early phases and maybe you are reaching too far. This is not super common among women, by the way. Actually, again, men tend to apply a little bit more at jobs that they are sort of 50-60% qualified, and women want to fit 100% or something. So there is a bit of a behavioral difference, but nonetheless, you know, it is like if somebody sidelines you or mistreats you or something like that, that may be also not to do with your external identities. It may be something of your behavior that rubbed them the wrong way. So it's not easy to know that this is why this is happening, and it's also not easy for you to know when you are making the decisions. But some things that you can do once you grow aware, like when you are sorting out the CVs for making an A-list, if you are in this position of the board or the hiring or whatever, or writing a recommendation. I mean, I do that now with recommendation letters. If I'm writing recommendation letters for my foreigners, for my underprivileged groups, I double check that I'm not cutting it shorter because I don't know what I'm like. I try to like put my quote unquote system 2 in place, and the same for the CVs. If somebody's maybe slightly underselling themselves, but it looks like they might, and I then might give an interview rather than ruling them out. So yeah, it is. I think it's important to become aware, but it's a slippery slope in my mind to say that, okay, everything that I experienced was to do with me being a woman or being a Turk or not, whatever, I don't know. Maybe some of it was, but how can I really know from that perspective? So it's, I try to keep a little distance, and I just try to do I try to do my job. I try to do it well. I try to respect my work, and I think at some point or another, I think somebody recognizes it, and yeah, this worked out okay-ish in my case.
Mm-hmm. What are the broader implications in, say, the metaverse, if we are able to disguise ourselves as male or neutral online? Can this be addressed?
Okay, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Eve was also asking earlier about the culture and geography. There are, I mean, first to address the other one, which we didn't address earlier, there are some studies that actually do show some of the gender differences in performance are really dependent on what country you are making the observation. And when the gender gap closes, some of the intellectual, quote unquote, intellectual performances, they also come closer. And the metaverse thing, it's a new area. I imagine there will be more experiments in the next 10 years, but at the moment, I don't think there are many applications and studies that shows how that might differ. The closest thing to that is, of course, like one can pick a different avatar and then you are more neutral. You can pick your own screen name and that may be neutral. I imagine that changes. The closest examples I know of that is people do it with emails, or they do it with online presence, in other online presence, not with visual avatars and metaverse. But I mean, one group, I think that was in the UK, they invented a male secretary to answer emails, and apparently they got different results. Like, you know, like I'm writing as John somebody to you. I have created a male persona, and they got quicker results or faster responses, or they were taken more seriously or something. So people do stuff like this, and I think it's the same direction if you think of the metaverse. And then I think you can do more anonymous experiments, but it is I don't know how far you can go with that. It's an interesting question. I don't have a ready answer.
I also like the question a lot, because it also mentions this factor of the experience, how important that one is, and if you can kind of change the role and experience something else, that, you know, it really makes it tangible what's going on all the time.
I mean, I know one more thing about that. There's a German guy that was in the 1980s. His name is Günther Waldorf. He wrote a book. He experienced Germany as a Turk. He took a wig and changed his, like, put contact lenses and changed his name, and he lived like that for a year. And he documented, he journaled what he experienced. And people do that. Like, and I also had a TED talk from somebody who was transgender person, so they went from being a man to a woman, and they also, like, it's a qualitative account of the experience, but they also journaled how the behavior and the attitude change, how the perception of your expertise and people interrupting you more often and things like this. So that was also quite interesting, and I think it goes in this direction with the avatars. You can experiment and see which one gets the best response, and I guess I don't know if you can stick to that is the problem with that. I mean, like for work and things.
Very cool. I think we have just one little last question. How do you think of the AITs? Are those tests validated to identify your implicit biases? Do you know what's meant by the IA?
Yeah, Krista, could you help us? Could you elaborate a little bit? Is this the intellectual aptitude test or?
Hi, yes. I meant by IAT the implicit association tests. I think it's from Howard University.
Yes.
Yeah. I heard about that you can identify your own implicit bias, but it's not really validated because there's a lot of how do you say that, criticism how you can transfer it to the real life.
Yeah, it is a debated area. I think we don't have like an explicit and well-validated measure, a psychological measure. There are publications around this topic, but I think it's more experimental at this point. We don't have like a 10 question that tells you exactly where your soft spots are. I think as it is, at least how much I know about it is we need to reflect and rely on introspection more than an external test. The external tests are very hard because the earlier discussion of the cultural biases and things like that. So it's not easy to pick that universally from people. They may have very different, very hidden biases, and you may not be able to catch them. It might get there the more research that gets carried out, but I'm not aware of one that is just, it is probably a helpful start. It might create conversation, it might make you think about it, but I think we don't have one that just, off the shelf, an app that you use and then it tells you exactly where you have a soft spot and that you should work on. That would be a nice project.
Agree. So I think we're quickly coming to an end, really. Thank you very much for participating. I think, there's one last question. Is implicit bias an extension of othering of, I'm sorry, I can't.
Homophily.
Yeah. Arzu, can you read your capacity to
relate or understand people depends on your similarity? Yeah. Right. Yeah, to some degree. I think I think there's definitely, when we are putting people in boxes, it is very important what our references are, what feels normal and comfortable to us, and what is similar, what is relatable, what is, what pleasing. And this comes from how we are raised, right? So what is your normal may not be exactly my normal. And I had to relearn that, for example, going from Turkey to Finland, social distance and what is considered polite and what is considered intrusive is different as a cultural upbringing. And I think that also changes with the family to family, not only from country to country or region to region. So there's definitely that, but I think it's not only that, it's also a sort of a statistical association about who is in a particular role. And if you see, if the way that you are raised, if you see only men doing political work or only women doing teaching or something like that, at some point as a young person, you see yourself in there and you don't see yourself in there or something. So there's a prohibitiveness of it, that there's a group that is like all one kind, and then you don't, if you are not from that group, you don't feel entitled to it. And I think that is not about, it's not only about similarity, but it's also about the perceived hierarchy or perceived association with certain roles and tasks, but it is absolutely a factor as far as I can judge. And good question, Ivo.
Wonderful, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think Arzu come today, and thank you very much for these wonderful explanations and discussion at the end. Yeah, I will just very briefly, very quickly make a short outro. I don't know if you can see this. Yeah, takeaways, Q&A, contact if anyone missed it before. Just a quick annunciation for our next events. The next one is on 1st of October. The conference We Tech Together, where it's a large conference with many women in technology networks, and we're actually taking part as well and holding a workshop. If you would like to take part in that, you can also drop me a message, because we have three free tickets. And this is our next role model events. We know now once more how important the role model and showing role models is, and this is a very interesting event at the ETH of Zurich on 6th of October with Janina Kugel. You can also find these events on our webpage and then enroll for them. And if you're interested in our newsletter, please subscribe, and we're always very happy about any kind of feedback. So thank you very much for everything. Thank you, Arzu. Thank you for all the participants. It was lovely to have you here, and thank you for your interest in Reshape Tech. And
thank you, Jenny, for making this happen. Ideas and leads and I don't know, more examples.